Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. All right, well, 2022 is going to be a critical year for America. AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, along with their nearly 2 million members. The fight to stop out-of-control spending in the president's Build Back Better scheme is far from over, and Congress is plotting more legislation that could hurt our seniors. The midterm elections will be a battle for freedom versus socialism. Unlike liberal groups, AMAC is America's conservative, action-oriented 50-plus organization fighting hard every day here in Washington and across the nation for our seniors. So I'm urging you to choose AMAC now. You will receive all of the great membership benefits, including AMAC discounts on hotels, travels, and restaurants, and your membership will support your conservative values. So go to amac.us/Ellis. That's amac.us/ELLIS to become an AMAC member now.
As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Hi, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and a lot of you have been asking me what's going on with election integrity. That is definitely an evergreen issue, but specifically for the Electoral Count Act that is being discussed in Congress. And how exactly is this bipartisan? What is going on with this potential reform? And should conservatives support this act reform in Congress? So joining me now is my good friend Hans Von Spakovsky, who is with the Heritage Foundation and, of course, is one of the chief election attorneys and experts with this issue. We've had him on before. So, Hans, thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, sure. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. So Electoral Count Act, let's just go through kind of what it is and exactly what the details are that this apparently bipartisan support from Congress is actually contemplating.
Sure. The Electoral Count Act was put in place by Congress shortly after the 1876 presidential race. If folks don't remember that, it was between Republican Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden. And the reason they put it in was because 4 states, including, I think, Florida and South Carolina, couldn't figure out who had won those states. And so they each sent 2 sets of electors, one for each presidential candidate, to Congress. And Congress had to figure out which of those electoral votes to count. And so after that happened, they, of course, picked the Republican electors and awarded it to Rutherford B. Hayes. They came up with this statute that lays out the process for counting the electoral votes in Congress on January 6th. And that included, as you know, Jenna, the ability of a senator and a representative from states to sign a joint objection to the electoral votes from a particular state, and then each house, the House of Representatives and the Senate, are supposed to debate it and vote either up or down whether the objection is sustained.
Right. And so this is, according to some in Congress now, antiquated. And they're saying, well, given the debacle that happened in November 2020, and I think I'm putting that mildly, that the Electoral Count Act needs some reform. And so what they're contemplating now, and what I think is probably the most dangerous in their contemplation, is that they want these certificates of ascertainment to be provided by the governors of the states rather than the state legislature. So, what is the agenda in your view from how they're attempting to reform this law? Does it need to be reformed? And what's your position on some of these possible ways that they're trying to reform the act?
Well, I'm not really sure we need to have a reform. I mean, consider what happened on January 6th. There were objections filed. They were debated in each house of Congress. They were voted down, and then they continued with the counting. Now, anyone who thinks that a reformed Electoral Count Act would have somehow stopped what happened at the Capitol, with people breaking in and the violence that occurred there, I think is not being very realistic. I don't think the folks who were there protesting would have somehow changed their mind depending on if the procedures in the Electoral Count Act had somehow been changed. So it actually, I think, worked the way it was supposed to. So I'm not sure we really need amendments, although I have to tell you, I'm still looking at it to decide all of the different provisions, whether I think it's needed. By the way, one of the other changes, I don't know if you noticed this, was that under federal law, each house is limited to 2 hours of debate on each objection that is filed. The amendment says that the 2 hours of debate will apply to any and all objections that are filed by members of the Senate and the House, and rather than one member of each house, it takes 1/5 of the members of each house to even file an objection.
And that's interesting because there have been a few different members of Congress that have come out and said, this is to streamline the process to make it, more difficult in a sense for members of Congress to object to electors. And of course, we've seen in just the past several elections, both Democrats and Republicans that have filed these objections. Democrats have objected to the last several Republican elected presidents, including Donald Trump in 2016. So this isn't just, one-sided. It's not just reactionary to the 2020 election, but they're also trying to streamline the process in their language, streamline it to also contemplate some of the judicial objections and have an easier pathway to have some of these objections heard. And so based on what we saw in 2020 and a lot of these very meritorious contentions and issues with basically the states and the administration of the election ignoring state law, do you think that that's a good idea to have a better process in place to hear these? And would this in fact be better?
Well, like I said, I'm still looking at it. I am troubled a little bit by the fact that they're cementing everything as of Election Day. In other words, they're saying that whatever the state law says on Election Day as to who submits the electoral votes to Congress, whether it's the legislature or the governor, that's set. And I'm not quite sure why you would want to take away the power of the legislature to do that prior to the time that the electors are actually meeting in December or Congress is meeting in January, because that kind of gets rid of a situation where, if the legislature actually finds a serious problem that happened in the election, like what happened in the 1876 election, it would seem that these amendments would prevent an investigation of that. It gives it over to the federal courts too, which might or might not be a good idea. It does have a direct appeal, as you know, and an expedited process to get it up to the Supreme Court. But like I said, I'm still kind of evaluating this. And again, I think it worked the way it was supposed to on January 6th of last year, and it has worked the way it was supposed to in prior elections. As you know, the count was never delayed past January 6th in any of those prior elections.
Right. And I think, giving a very thorough review of this and saying you're still in process of looking at this is actually wise and what more of these members of Congress should do. And
Right.
where a lot of listeners have asked me, what's going on with this, it seems like the mainstream media is totally ignoring this in favor of, other potentially more pressing issues like whether or not Joe Biden tested negative for COVID this week, or Kamala Harris is identifying herself based on her
Right.
color of suit jacket. Those things are really important, but they're not really being transparent on what exactly is being changed in this law
Right.
and the rationale for it, and also whether or not it's actually constitutionally viable. Because a question that I have that would in my view, be very problematic to this would be taking the power away from the state legislature and giving it to the governor to submit that certification of ascertainment when a state legislature may or may not have given a governor the authority to do that. And so it seems that the federal law here would be overriding state law in a way that may not be constitutionally viable, because the US Constitution gives the manner in which electors are chosen to the state legislature. So those certifications aren't constitutionally required to go through the governor, but they are through the state legislature. So is this a way that that Congress is just simply trying to say, listen, we're coming together and we're trying to make this more streamlined in a way that's actually going to aggravate the process and have a potential for a Republican or Democrat to actually abuse this law in the future in a way that currently they even can't?
I think this is more of a proposition of them being able to say, oh, what happened on January 6th in 2020? Look, we've done something about it.
Wow.
I mean, that's what I think is going on here. Like I said, I'm not really sure we need any changes to it. I tell you something else hasn't been mentioned. But look, this bill was introduced with an accompanying bill, one that I haven't heard people talking about. And it's one that makes certain changes to the federal law that requires all election jurisdictions to maintain all of their election records for 22 months after the election. As you know, that's very important if you're going to investigate election results. And who do they give the power to determine the guidelines for that to? The U.S. Department of Justice. Now, remember, Jenna, last year, the U.S. Department of Justice sent a threatening letter to Arizona saying, oh, if you conduct an audit, you'll be violating that federal statute. That was an absurd position, one that's not true. And I don't understand why they would give the Justice Department, which these days is a partisan weapon, why would they give them the ability, given that history, to determine the guidelines for the maintenance of federal records instead of giving it to the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, which is actually a bipartisan agency and would be able to prevent that kind of partisan behavior that we're getting from the Justice Department.
And it's interesting that some of the Republicans that are behind this that are now saying and have the ability now to say that, okay, this reform is bipartisan, are people like Susan Collins that, I wouldn't particularly put her in a Republican category. She leans on a lot of these issues more in line with Democrats. And so is there anyone that you're aware of people that, my viewers would necessarily trust, like a Jim Jordan or a Ted Cruz or, someone like that who's actually supporting any of these reforms, or do they have concerns? Do we know? Because I haven't really heard a lot of people talking about this.
No, I don't think we know. They've been so concerned with, for example, the vote-a-rama that they just held in the Senate on so many other bills, everything from the inflation hitting the country to high gas prices to other issues that I don't think a lot of attention has been paid to this bill that's been dropped. So I don't think they've come out with a position yet on this.
And do we have any timeline at all on when they could act on this potential legislation? Or, I mean, where is it at in the flow in Congress?
I've heard a rumor that they may try to get to it in September or October. I don't know if you saw, but Senator Klobuchar just held a hearing on her version of how she thinks the Electoral Count Act should be changed. And her version, of course, tries to bring in all the changes in federal election laws that they tried to push through in H.R. 1 into a bill supposedly dealing with the Electoral Count Act. That, hopefully, the Klobuchar bill, I'm hoping, will not go anywhere at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and as viewers will remember, H.R. 1, of course, was attempting to federalize elections and was completely unconstitutional. So all of those democratic propositions, we certainly wouldn't want to be in federal law, whether it's the Electoral Count Act reform or whether it was H.R. 1 in general. And and those are some other concerns is, obviously Congress does have to deal with the count of the electors on January 6th, and that is part of what they're doing. But this appears to be a way that they are just making this more complicated than it needs to be, which is exactly what you've been saying. But one of the other reforms, and I definitely have to ask you about this, is that they're trying to also say that the vice president's role is purely ministerial. And that seems to be something that both parties want to agree on. Is that something that concerns you? Or, obviously we know on January 6th of 2020, that's exactly what Vice President Pence actually said.
Well, I have to say that that's one thing that I actually agree. I don't think the vice president has a role other than ministerial, and I don't think he has the ability, for example, to object to the electoral counts from a particular state. The members of the Senate and the House do, in a vote. They can do that kind of an objection, but I don't think the vice president does have that power. And I know, look, there's disagreement on this, but it's an issue that really hasn't come up in our history before, and it's something that a lot of folks disagree on. But I tend to think that the vice president's power presiding over the Senate is just ministerial.
Mm-hmm. And you're right that, a lot of these issues in the process are things that either have been issues in the past that have given rise initially, as you said in the very beginning, to the Electoral Count Act, or they're things that we need to then contemplate as circumstances arise. I mean, that is generally an issue of first impression, and those happen regularly throughout the course of litigation and contemplation of whether it's reforms on the legislative level or anything in the area of jurisprudence. And so, it's frustrating to me, and I know a lot of people, that this type of robust debate on how should we conduct elections is not something that both sides are promoting, and certainly not the media, and certainly not the weaponized version of the DOJ and the left. And as you mentioned right before we started recording this, this was actually the number one issue, election integrity, in a straw poll. I mean, so this is something that people really care about. And it seems like this debate is being stifled, and mainstream media, especially on traditionally more conservative channels, aren't even willing to discuss it.
Right. Look, I'll tell you an issue that I think is much more important that Congress is not dealing with at all. And that's the fact that the Census Bureau just recently released a survey they did that showed that they made mistakes in 14 states in their count. They overcounted 8 states and they undercounted 6 states, to the point where Florida, for example, should have gotten 2 more congressional seats that they didn't get. Texas should have gotten an additional seat, and other distortions like that. That will affect a presidential race, because the number of representatives in Congress that you have obviously affects how many electoral votes you have. That is, to me, a bigger issue right now than amending the Electoral Count Act. And have you heard a word about this, Jenna? You haven't heard a word about it.
Not at all. I mean, and I'm actually just hearing about this now from you, which is ridiculous that we can have something like that going on that the people don't know about when we supposedly live in a
Right.
representative constitutional republic, and B, that Congress is at Nancy Pelosi's flying to Taiwan and not dealing with something that is that basic to the framework of our republic. So why do you think that is? Are they just ignoring this? And why would the US Census, I mean, how can they make that big of a mistake when we're in 2022? That just seems mind-blowing to me.
Well, they don't explain how the mistake occurred, which is something Congress needs to investigate. And contrast this with the fact that they did a similar survey after the 2010 census, and they found that, yeah, they did make an overcount in the 2010 census, 1/100th of 1%. It was statistically insignificant. So they didn't make the kind of mistakes in the 2010 census that they made in this one. But like I said, this is a significant issue, not just for the Electoral College, but also, as you know, I think something like $1.5 to $2 trillion in federal funds are distributed to states based on their population. So states like New York, which got overcounted, are going to get more money than states like Florida, which got undercounted.
And does that strike you as a little odd that the red states like Florida and Texas are being undercounted and a blue state like New York is being overcounted? I mean, is there some kind of manipulation going on here?
Well, it's a heck of a coincidence, but in fact, of the 8 states that were overcounted, all of them except one were a blue state. And of the 6 states that were undercounted, all of them were red states with the exception of one blue state. So it's a heck of a coincidence, isn't it?
Yeah, and this seems like it would be much more important for an investigation and a correction
Right.
and legislation around this, and for Congress to actually do its job if either side really cares about representative democracy and being a constitutional republic and having accurate numbers. And this is why, people, it's so frustrating. And I know, Hans, you go and speak, at many different conventions. I do as well. And, the number one thing that people always ask me about is what is going on with election integrity?
Right.
Why aren't we able to just count the votes and count on the night of the vote? I mean, look at what just happened in the Arizona primary. I mean,
Right.
this is ridiculous. And why in 2022, now heading into the midterms, has it seems like not a lot has really been done. And I know you and I have been, and a lot of our other colleagues in Washington and beyond have been working on this issue. But I think for a lot of people, they're wondering, can we really trust the election going into November?
Well, I would tell you that there are a lot of states that actually have improved things. As you know, for example, one of the biggest factors in the 2020 election were what we call Zuck bucks, right? Mark Zuckerberg contributing several $100 million, which were then given in grants to local election offices in places like Philadelphia and Detroit. And basically, they used government offices for the Get Out the Vote campaign of the Democratic Party. A number of states, I think about a dozen and a half, have actually banned that kind of private funding. States like Florida, for example. So that actually is a good change that should make people feel a little bit better. Some states have gotten worse, New York and California being an example of that, but a number of other states actually have improved things. So while I don't have total confidence, I do have a lot more confidence in this election as we go into it.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you've consistently reminded me, and I think is well worth repeating here, is that the election integrity and issues surrounding election law have been contemplated and have been battled over long before the November 2020
That's right.
election. This
Yeah.
isn't a new issue. It's very difficult to make changes. And so while I think America's attention has been riveted now on this issue, which is a great thing. And I actually think a huge improvement going into November as well, where people aren't going to just trust the system anymore. There will be many more people who will not only get out and vote, but who will be poll watchers, will
Right.
be election officials, will care. It will be a lot more difficult for some of the things that happened in November of 2020 to happen again because of that. But, these are types of things that people like you have been working on, well before November of 2020. And we have actually improved. And I do think that there is a lot of hope and people should feel, at least reasonably confident that we are moving in the right direction.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that, and I hope not only that folks get out and vote in person, hopefully, but also that they do exactly what you just talked about, which is go work in a polling place, go be a poll watcher, ask questions now at the local meetings of your county election board to make sure that they're setting things up ahead of time to make sure that we have honesty and integrity in the election process. It's that kind of grassroots involvement that really makes a difference.
Absolutely. And, we've had some historic wins as well, like in the Wisconsin Supreme Court that said that all of these unsupervised ballot drop
Right.
boxes were actually illegal. I mean, that's a really great thing in terms of election integrity. So, there have been a couple of these now judicial area cases where after the fact, when it's not quite as politicized now, they're willing to make
Right.
some of these judgments, and litigation does take time. So, is there anything else as well in the last few minutes that I have with you, Hans, that Heritage is looking at or focused on that it would be good for viewers to know and understand about election integrity? I know our good friends over at the America First Policy Institute and Ken Blackwell, they've been going around and doing a lot of these really great grassroots seminars to teach people how to
Right.
become more involved of what we just talked about. I mean, so there's a lot going on, and I know Heritage has been right at the foundation of that as well.
Well, like I said, I just think it's important for people to get involved and also make sure that their state legislators, that they're talking to them about improving and fixing things. That's the most important. That's the most important persuasion I can try to get out to folks. It's again, grassroots involvement makes all the difference. Plus the added and new attention that folks are finally giving to this area.
Yeah. Well, we will be looking at the Electoral Count Act reforms and hope that you'll join me again soon if and when that's actually taken up by Congress and we can contemplate that a little bit more and share some thoughts. But always appreciate your work, and thank you so much for joining me today, Hans. Really appreciate it. And where can people follow you and also the work of the Heritage Foundation?
They can go to heritage.org and they'll find there not just stuff I write for Heritage, but for other people like Fox News, because it all gets republished at Heritage.
Excellent. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. MyPillow is having their biggest sheet sale of the year. You all have helped build MyPillow into the amazing company that it is today. Now, Mike Lindell, the inventor and CEO, wants to give back exclusively to you, his listeners. The Percale bed sheet set is available in a variety of colors and sizes, and they are all on sale. So, for example, the queen size is regularly priced at $89.98, but is now only $39.98 with our listener promo code Jenna, Jenna. So order now, because when they're gone, they're gone. The Percale bed sheets are breathable and have a cool and crisp feel. These come with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee, so don't miss out on this incredible offer. There's a limited supply, so be sure to order now. You can call 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna, or go to mypillow.com/Jenna. You can click on the radio listeners square and use the promo code Jenna. That's Jenna. Thank you so much to all of Mike Lindell's listeners and listeners of this podcast for making sure to support MyPillow and using our exclusive listener promo code Jenna. That's Jenna.